right, so anyway, guys, today is Sunday, April 17, 2022. Happy Easter. For those of you who celebrate it, I hope that you have a safe and fun holiday, however you may celebrate it. Back when I was a kid, yes, I did celebrate Easter with my family. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so it was a religious holiday for us. We would actually go to church that day, Easter Sunday morning, and there would be a big mass. And then, and hilariously enough, there would always be a ton of people there on Easter. It was like people only went on holidays. They would never go regularly, but they would only go on holidays to church. It's really real genuine effort there. But anyway, what would we do on Easter? Several different things. First of all, when I was younger, we'd have an Easter egg hunt. And it was myself and my cousin would go through the house looking for plastic Easter eggs. And sometimes inside there'd be a piece of candy. Sometimes inside there'd be like a quarter. And if we were lucky, a few of them had $1 in them. So you go through the house looking around and maybe make a few bucks and get a bunch of pieces of candy, okay? Also, when I was very young, I remember my mom used to get Easter baskets, which was basically a wicker basket with a bunch of either toys or candy in it, and the candy would last a long time. So it would be like Cadbury cream eggs, usually like a large chocolate bunny, sometimes those peanut butter, like Reese's peanut butter eggs. So basically a whole bunch of candy, and it would be meant to be eaten over time. It wasn't like, oh, my parents get me a basket, and I eat all the candy within a week. It was like basically every day, I'm allowed one piece of candy, and you get it usually as a dessert after dinner or something like that, and it gets rationed out. So that basket, that Easter basket, sometimes would last like a month or two, because there's so much in it, and it would be stretched out, you see. So there was that, and then food-wise, what would we do? Well, let me think about this. The first thing is that for dinner, well, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. My mom would make what was called an Easter plate, okay? So if you don't know what an Easter plate is, I don't blame you. I think it's an Italian thing. So what it would be is she would take hard salami, and she would take a meat that's called prosciutto, which is also Italian meat, and she would take cottage cheese and hard-boiled egg. Those four key ingredients, okay? And she would cut it up into rectangular strips, all right, like rectangular long pieces, okay? And you would take those pieces once they were all cut up, and you would stack them on a giant like plate in a ring. So you'd have like an outer ring and then higher rings going all the way up, so it was like a big tower of food, okay? And what it was a finger foods. It was like if you're hungry, you grab a piece of hard-boiled egg, it's good. Or you grab a piece of, salami or whatever you feel like, because it's 4 completely different flavors. Every piece is completely different. And you would make this like the day before Easter, and Easter morning you would take it out, and anyone who was hungry during the day could run and grab a piece and just eat during the day. And you would have this for a few days. It wouldn't last forever because, you can't have food out like that for too long. So you'd probably eat a lot of it on Easter and put it in the fridge, and then every once a day take it out, eat a little bit more until it's mostly gone. So that was the Easter plate that we used to do. For dinner, traditionally on Easter, we would have some kind of ham. And I remember sometimes we had baked ham. Sometimes it was just like a ginormous ham slice. And I don't remember if my mom would fry it or if we would bake that in the oven. I think we would bake it in the oven, because I distinctly remember ham with pineapple. So I think my mom would put it in like a big baking pan and bake it in the oven with pineapple and a cherry. And she would baste it. Yeah, I remember now. It was like a cinnamon and the juices of the pineapple, and she would baste the ham while it baked in the oven. I'm remembering all this now for the first time in a very long time. And then sometimes we'd have different kinds of potatoes, like cheesy potatoes. You know how you make scalloped potatoes? Sometimes she would make those with it. Something like that. But usually it was a traditional like Easter ham with some kind of sides. That would be dinner. Now, the one thing that my mom would make that everyone freaks out every time I mention it, I'm going to mention it, okay? Easter plate. Not Easter. I'm failing. I read the chat and it distracted me. Hold on. We're going to start over. Hold on, everyone. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the pre-stream podcast for Easter Sunday. Let's try this again. So, my mom would make what was called, and this is so weird, spaghetti cake. Now, one of the reasons why I think it's weird, okay, is because she called it spaghetti cake, but it's made with linguine. It's kind of like when everyone used to call Nintendo games instead of video games in general. You would say every video game was a Nintendo game, or when everyone just said Coke rather than, oh, there's Coke, there's Pepsi, there's Cola, they would just say Coke. They do this a lot. You can take a word that becomes like a brand, that brand becomes synonymous with the product, even though it's not the same product. So I think she just called it spaghetti cake because it was like everything was spaghetti, even though it was linguine, it was still spaghetti cake. So what is this? And by the way, it's Italian. It's an Italian dish. What it is you boil up about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of linguine, okay? You then combine that with milk and a ton of eggs and a bunch of other seasonings and ingredients, and it gets whipped up essentially into like almost like a pudding-like consistency, like maybe like think about like custard, something like that. And so it becomes this messy gloop, and then you put it into a baking pan, and you add seasonings on top. Like I know for a fact it was like there was definitely sugar and cinnamon was put on top. I don't remember what else she would put in it. Okay, so she would put all this in a big baking pan. Then you would bake it as if you were baking a real cake. I know it's not really a real cake, but you would bake it like a real cake. And then when it came out, the top would be like almost crispy consistency, but underneath would be chewy, gooey pasta in this like baked custard tapioca-like consistency. And let me tell you, I've never eaten anything like this in my life. Okay, seriously, I never had anything like this in my life at all. I remember eating it, and it's weird because you get sweetness on the top. You get crunchiness and sweetness on the top from all the toppings that are put on top, like the cinnamon and the sugar and stuff. And as you eat further down, you distinctly taste pasta. You're going to taste a lot of pasta, but then you get this other flavor from the pudding style stuff in there too. It's just like, let me put it this way. It's weird, but I eventually grew to like it because this was a family tradition we did in the house every year for Easter. The Easter cake, the spaghetti cake, whatever you want to call it. It was a family tradition. And the funny part is, at that time, I never thought anything of it. I thought maybe this is just a regular thing that people do for Easter. And then over time, as I started telling people about my childhood and things that I would do back when I was a kid, and this was one of the family traditions we had, every time that I tell people this, they absolutely freak out and say, what are you, a fucking weirdo? Like, what is that? A spaghetti cake? Who does that? This is the weirdest thing we've ever heard of. Why would you do that? It's disgusting. Well, I'm just telling you from, realistically from my childhood what we would do. So, a couple days ago, I called my parents, okay, and, they were preparing for Easter. And I said, so what are you up to? And my mom's like, oh, well, I'm making dough, and we're going to make some cookies. I said, oh, that's cool. What kind of cookies? And she says, Italian-style cookies. It's the one where you fold over the dough and you put fruit in them. So you put different fruit toppings and things in them. I was like, that sounds delicious. Now, when I was a kid, we used to buy those. She didn't make them. We would buy them from like an Italian bakery. Apparently, all the Italian bakeries in Connecticut went out of business. So you can't even buy Italian cookies anymore. You have to make your own, which is why my mom was going to make them. I was like, that sounds really awesome. I wish I was there to have them. That sounds delicious. And then my mom says, yeah, I got to get all these cookies done because then I got to get the spaghetti cake going. I was like, spaghetti cake? So I'm not crazy. This really happened. She's like, yeah, spaghetti cake. What do you mean? I was like, you realize when I tell anyone about this that they think I'm nuts. And she's like, no, it's traditional Italian food. It was always made in my household when we were growing up. Spaghetti cake every year for Easter. So there you go. I didn't make it up. It's real. And I confirmed with her the ingredients and everything. It was funny because the other day I was actually talking about this on a stream and someone said, would you ever make spaghetti cake? And I'm like, if I was ever to make spaghetti cake, it would definitely be like an oddity. Like, I'm not doing it because I think it's going to be good. I'm doing it just because I want to see what it's like for myself, trying to remember my childhood. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I would get the recipe from my mom and just on a whim try to make it just to see what it would be. I don't know. I don't know how it would be or how, I remember distinctly the taste of cinnamon and sugar. Of course, I remember like a chewy, gooey pasta that had like a tapioca style taste to it. That's all I really remember. So, I don't know. Anyway, those are some of the, one other Easter tradition. Yes. Kind of like during the week before Easter, we would hard boil a whole bunch of eggs, couple dozen usually. All right. And then we would color them. Now back then, coloring was interesting. you would have these tablets. I don't know how they do it today. I have no clue. Back then, you would have these little tablets. You would take different cups, and you would fill them with water, and you would take these tablets, and you would dump them in the water. The tablets would dissolve and fizz, and fill that water as dye. It would become a cup of dye, okay? And then what you would need to do, you would actually have these spoons that you would put your egg in. And it was neat. It wasn't just like a regular spoon. It was like a ring of wire, and then it would go up. You would put your egg into the wire, hold it in place, and you would dunk this down into the cup of dye, okay? And you would hold it there for like a minute or two. And depending on how dark you wanted the egg, you hold it in longer. If you want it darker, you hold it in even longer. If you want it lighter, you just hold it in for like maybe a minute. And then you would take it out, and it would be dyed that color. Now, you could actually draw designs on your eggs if you had a wax crayon. What you could actually do is draw polka dots, draw a bunny on it, draw a little squiggly line. You would draw on the egg with the wax crayon. Then you would dip it in the dye, and when you took it out, wherever you drew with the wax crayon would remain white, while everywhere else would be dyed the color that you put it in, okay? So we would, as a family, dye eggs together and get a couple dozen dyed eggs, which is really cool. And then those dyed eggs would actually become the hard-boiled eggs that we used for the Easter plate that I already mentioned. So it was dual use. The kids get something fun to do for Easter, but also you get an Easter plate out of it on the weekend to eat, which is delicious. Pretty cool. I thought it was a nice thing to do. It's funny because now I look back at these things, right? I look back at these times of my childhood, and I'm like, oh, wow, that was neat. It was fun that we did that. I'm happy that my parents did that with me. It was nice that they spent time, and, you know, that was probably a lot of work and effort to organize these kind of things with the kid. You know, the Easter egg hunts, the Easter basket, coloring the eggs. Easter was probably a very active time for my parents, planning around, oh, what are we going to do for the kids, right? And it's just funny because when you're young, you just don't realize it. You don't realize that these events are actually probably big planned things that your parents put a lot of time and effort into. But now that I'm older, I appreciate it. I think